Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I am the head coach at G.R.A.C.E Financial Coaching. And I am super excited to welcome bookkeeper Andrea Rotondo today. And we are going to talk about, of course, the dumbest thing she's ever done with money. But first, Andrea is a bookkeeper and the owner of Liquid Cents Bookkeeping. She's got a background in psychology, years of volunteer work, and lives a life of a military spouse. Shout out. Now a veteran spouse. And Andrea has a desire to connect and help others in a very meaningful way. And she supports women business owners who want to build wealth for themselves while also helping others. How are you, Andrea?
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this. And
Yes,
thanks
it's been a
again
long
for
time
having me
coming.
here.
We have been trying to get Andrea on
Yes.
for some time now.
I
Well,
know, just things kept on happening, but
I
we made it
know.
happen. So we're
Exactly.
here.
I'm so glad we have you here now. So before we get into your dumbest thing, tell me more about your bookkeeping business because I am a financial coach, but that doesn't really mean anything. Every small business needs some sort of bookkeeping help, do they not?
Yes, absolutely. So, bookkeeping, people tend to think that you need to basically keep track of your finances only if you're like a really large company and you have employees and things like that. But the reality is that bookkeeping is the first step to help you connect and understand how the money in your business is flowing. And in most cases, at least most likely the people that are watching this, their small businesses are the main source or one of the biggest sources for their personal finances. So it is so important to get a hold of that whole picture of how their business is running at the same time that you are doing the same thing in your personal finances. And that just creates that really nice,
Right.
like, merge and combination of both of them, that sweet spot where you're finally able to say, okay, I got this. I understand. And
Yeah.
that's very hard to do. That's super, I would say, underestimated,
Yes.
understanding your numbers.
Yeah,
Um,
I came from a background of commercial real estate management and I was reading financial reports all day long. So honestly, and I have a 4-year business degree, but honestly that means nothing.
yeah.
It's really more of the experience I had working in commercial real estate. And I remember talking to people and thinking like, wait, what you don't do like a profit and loss statement? You don't use
Right.
QuickBooks? You don't work with a bookkeeper? Like I just couldn't understand that people weren't doing any of that. And that happens so frequently. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yes, that happens all the time, especially when it comes to tax season. That's another misconception that people think I need a bookkeeper so that I can file my taxes because I don't know what happened. Or I'm going to let my tax preparer handle it and they're going to tell me about my profit. And it's really the other way around. It's the business owners not only responsibility, and just being compliant and all of that, which is very important, but also taking it beyond compliance and just you're the business owner, you're the one in charge of your finances, you're the one that brings the numbers to your tax preparer instead of the other way around, instead of having to be surprised by, oh, I owe taxes, I had no idea.
Right. Yeah.
This can
The
help you
difference
understand that,
between
right?
what your tax professional is doing and what your accountant is doing or your bookkeeper is doing is it's almost like when somebody I relate it again back to the commercial real estate thing, but when you need a gas line repaired in your house, so if you live in a house and you have natural gas, a lot of people don't realize you call a plumber for that.
I would
That
have even known
right.
that.
But the plumber doesn't just work with water and sewage and stuff like that. When you need a
Right.
gas line installed or repaired, you call a plumber. And it's almost like, oh, I didn't realize running
Right.
gas lines was a function of being a plumber. What do you think about being a bookkeeper that you do that people don't realize that you do?
I love that question. I think mostly is getting them to connect the dots for them between all the effort that they're putting into their business and all the thinking and brainstorming on how to get from here where I am right now to my goals in 5, 10 years, or even the goals for this year. People try to get to a place without understanding where they are. So it's a very common example. You want to go somewhere, you put it in your maps, you also need a starting point in order to take you there and build that route for you. So that is another thing that bookkeeping can do for you, is helping you to help you understand where you are, so that then you can take the best steps for you and the best route for you specifically, to take you where you want to be specifically. Because when you look up things online, there's a whole bunch of really good advice, but it's very broad, like,
Yes,
okay, but how can I take that piece of information and apply it for me today? It's like, oh, then you have all this thinking and guessing, and then it kind of ends up becoming nothing. Like that advice just flies out the window because you can't do anything with it.
I
So
am
that's another thing that
literally,
we can do
as
there.
soon as you said looking online, my first thought was people going to WebMD and Googling their symptoms, and 20
Right.
minutes later going, oh, I guess I had a heart attack last week.
Yes.
So
Right. And you get
true.
the worst like news
Right.
possible. And maybe the news are not that bad, like maybe you're not in such a bad place as you think that you are. And
Yes.
again, just really knowing facts that are your facts and your data instead of somebody else's story,
Oh my
which at
God,
the
so
end of the day,
true.
that's what it is. Those numbers are your story. And I love to say that whenever I talk to my clients, I'm like, okay, let's talk about your story. Let's talk about these numbers and what story they're telling
Right.
you, about your business, about the way you handle your money. So everybody, everybody's in a different place. Everybody has a different starting point. Everybody
Yeah.
has a different goal. And it's very unfair on us as business owners to say that we should all fit in one box.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of business owners, Hernan, you are up early this morning, my friend. Always bringing good content. Thanks, buddy. Yes. So everybody is totally different. We don't fit in the same box, and that
right.
goes medically, from an
Yeah.
accounting standpoint, from a business standpoint, from what we're making, from what our goals are. It's so true. Who do you specifically help with these issues?
Yeah, I help mostly women who are service based. For example, therapists or coaches and consultants are my main like they tend to gravitate towards me, and I think it's because of like that background in psychology that you were talking about. I love enjoying, I love working with women who are helping other people. In a way, it's kind of my way of saying I'm contributing. It's kind of like a chain reaction. I help you, you help others. We're all
Right.
part of like this cheesy goal of making this world a better place. So if you are like in the business of helping people, I want to help you with your numbers pretty much.
I love it. I love it. I tend to actually get a lot of uh, men and women, but people who are in industries such as firefighting, police officers. I have a ton of teachers that I work with.
Oh,
So
I love
same
that.
same thing. You're helping the
Yeah.
people who help other people. So I love
Yes.
that so much. That's such a great goal. But that doesn't mean just because you're not female doesn't mean you can't call Andrea, because you help
Right.
everybody, and everybody needs help with this for sure. Laura, good
Absolutely.
morning. She says everyone has a different story, but they are just as interesting as the next. That's so true,
Yes.
right? We're all unique. We're all little snowflakes. Let's go back to kindergarten and tell everybody how unique we are.
Yes.
But it's true. It still can, it's still, everybody has, you can have similar problems, right? But your ultimate goals, like you said, Andrea, are going to be totally, totally different.
Absolutely.
So speaking of goals, let's talk about the opposite of a goal. Let's talk about making some mistakes.
Yes.
Andrea, what is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money?
I think that the dumbest thing that I did with money was thinking of money itself as just a transactional resource instead of a more emotional one.
Oh,
So that's kind of like a whole story behind it. But I think that like the approaching money as just this like numbers on a
mhm.
screen with zero connection to my emotions led me to more mistakes and more mistakes, which I think that's the foundation of all of it.
Definitely. So when you say transactional, a lot of your mistakes came from just swiping the card and not understanding what was going on behind it.
Yes and no. So for example, we were talking about that I was a military spouse. My husband joined the military a year after we were married. So we left home, we left everybody we knew. We went to a new state. Life is different. Huge change. So now that I'm looking back at it, I see how life changes, like whether you plan for them or not, or they just came out, rang the doorbell, here I am. That really affects the way that you, or at least in my case, it affects how I manage my money. I have always been very organized with my money, and I think that's why I gravitated towards bookkeeping. It just comes natural. I always had my budget. I always knew how much money we had coming in, how much money we needed to pay everything. But when it came to big life changes, it kind that always threw me off. Like, I am a little bit too emotional because of how life is going right now. So I'm gonna go overspend. That's like the
Oh,
bottom line of it. Like all of these changes make me, or I don't want to say make me, I tend to react in that way to those life changes. I think it's more of like a control thing. I'm one of those people that are like, I have to have everything under control. And that's a way, very unhealthy way, to handle that, to like say, okay, I don't have control of anything else around me, but I have control of what I have, what I physically can grab with my hands. And a new thing is going to make me feel better. So when
yeah.
those
It's interesting that you have control of things like in your career, right? So as a bookkeeper, your whole goal is to have control of the numbers and talking
right.
to your clients about their spending and things like that. But and you had control of it in the sense that you had a budget. And I think you and me are similar because uh, there's different personality tests for people when it comes to their money, right? I am what they call a nerd spender. So
Oh,
I
I
am
like
someone
that.
who knows the numbers, but I still love spending money.
Right.
And so I
Right.
jokingly tell some of my clients, I'm like, listen, I'm just where you are. I am a nerd spender. I keep my budget. I know exactly how much is in my budget, and I know exactly how much I should not have spent today, but I spent it anyway.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And it's so funny because I don't know if I had ever like been in that position up until my husband joined the military, and everything was so different and so new. And I also decided that I was going to take on the responsibility of tracking everything. So for example, I think another mistake that falls into the same umbrella of the problem is I didn't leave kind of like a wiggle room in that budget to say, this month, I'm literally leaving my family, my friends, my career, everything that I have here to a whole new place that I have never in my life seen before. I already have an apartment I'm going to move into that I have never seen. This is huge. You know what I mean? I think I'm going to not want to cook for a few nights and just leave wiggle room for
Yeah.
that time
Yeah,
of
and the other thing people
adjustment.
don't think about with the moving thing specifically, because I have done this like every time I've moved, and when I lived in San Diego, I moved 4 times in 5 years. So,
Right.
um, you have to unpack your dishes, your
Oh my
silverware,
God.
and your pots and pans.
Your
Like
fridge, that is the
every
worst.
time.
Your
How do
fridge
I
and
do
the
this every
cleaning
single
stuff.
time?
That was one of the most painful things every time that we had to move, emptying out the fridge and all of your cleaning stuff. I'm like, it's so much money. So
Yeah,
much money
and
going.
depending on what you have under the sink, right? Like, and who's moving
Right.
you and how far you're moving, and if they're bringing a big truck, they won't take stuff
They
like
don't take that,
bleach or
right?
anything that has ammonia, like Windex, and you have to like just give it away or pour it down the sink or whatever. I mean, best
Right.
methodology, obviously, but it's so frustrating. And then the food thing. Oh my gosh, I remember one time when I moved from New York to San Diego. Um, I'm looking at my pantry and I'm like, what am I going to do with all of these spices? Like, this is crazy. The
Right.
truck's going to take 2 weeks to get there. I don't want these spices sitting in like, it was like in the summer too, in a hot
Oh,
moving truck for two
right.
weeks. I'm like, "Ugh, I'm just going to have to throw these out. This really stinks." Literally the next day, some woman I had never met magically appeared on my Facebook feed. It was like a friend shared something, and she said, "We are trying to collect new or even slightly used spices to be used in a food kitchen."
Oh, no
And I was
way.
like, "What?" I was like, here's a whole year's worth of
Yes.
spices," and she was so thankful. But outside of that, randomly
Right. That's
happening,
not the rule,
yeah,
right?
it's not the norm. You're usually throwing that stuff out every single time, especially when you're
Yeah.
military.
Yeah, that feels really painful. to throw all of that away.
So knowing that you looked at money as just simply transactional, black and white, here's my budget, here's what I can spend, and this is what I'm going to stick to. Like you were, I mean, you were very militaristic, really. You didn't leave that emotional wiggle room. You didn't leave
Right.
like I didn't when every time I moved. What do you think, knowing now, looking back on how you behaved in those ways previously, how has recognizing that money is more of an emotional thing, how has that benefited you in your financial life?
Oh my God, it's been such a big difference because that specific example that I'm giving you was the very first time, like when my husband first joined, and that was 8 years ago. And that happened every single move. So we moved in Michigan, like in 3 different homes, and then we moved to California and then Maryland, and now we're back in Florida. So in 7 years, we moved kind of like every year and a half. So I went through the whole thing every time, like, oh, I'm gonna, like it feels like a piece of you is staying there and you don't know what it's just such a ball of emotions. So now what I do is that whenever I know, at least for the changes that you have, that you're planning, because there's a lot of changes that are just gonna come at you. But for the changes that I have some kind of control, I do have a wiggle room in my budget for like whether if it's to have fun, like the last move that we had, or actually every single move that we had, we left time to visit the new states that we were driving through, for example. Um, so now when we moved here and we knew that it was going to be a very, very big move, I left a really big chunk of my savings specifically for that. So that the first move, it wouldn't feel like this gigantic pressure on me to keep control of my finances and keep control of the world and my kids. Like it just feels like a lot of pressure. So at least in that area of the finances, I leave a little bit extra in my bank account so that I can
That's so
spend a little
great.
bit
And
more.
when you're driving cross country, you don't want to be sitting there and saying, oh, sorry guys, that looks like a really cool local
Right.
restaurant and a
Yeah.
lot of fun, but we can't spend money on that because it's not in the budget because I didn't leave that little miscellaneous category or that little extra fun money
Right.
or that travel category. Literally was just talking to one of my clients last night. She is going to be going to, where the heck is she going? She's going somewhere for a vacation. Oh, they're going to like a lake house. And I said, okay, so next month when you guys go to the lake house, we need to create a budget line that says lake trip. And everything you guys spend in there, I want you to drag and drop all of those transactions and calculate those so that the next time we go on vacation, we know, okay, we're going back to the lake house. And during that week, we spend about $1,000. During that
Right.
week, we spend about $500. So we know the cost of where we're staying, right? Because you book it, Airbnb, VRBO, whatever you use. But how much are you spending on groceries once you get there? If you have little kids, are you going to be running out and getting diapers? What are we doing during that week? Are we going out to dinner? Is there a little place to go out to dinner? How much is that going to be? Are we buying alcohol? All of those things, gas to drive there, all of those things I love to have my clients take and put into a category and say, okay, if we do a similar trip to this again, we know this is going to be $800. We know this is going to be $400.
Right. And a lot of people think that having that specific, like a budget for things, it's kind of like a restraint on your spending. And after I went through all of this, I really think that it's the opposite. I think it's that you are making room for what it's important to you. And whether you fall under the category of overspender or I don't spend a dollar more, this kind of helps you to create a nice, healthy rhythm of like, I'm okay with spending this much. I'm okay with saving for this, or I know that I'm going to have something coming next month that it's a little bit extra, but it's summer right now. Maybe I can count on that right now and then I just pay it back to my savings. But the more of a clear plan that you have, the easier it feels to actually enjoy it. Because the truth is, for a lot of people, since money is emotional, at least I think so, when you're out there and you're on a vacation, you're on a trip, you're looking at new things, that if you don't really know how much money you have left, if money is a tricky topic for you, if money is a tricky topic to bring up with your spouse, all of that creates this uncomfortable moment instead of giving you the freedom to enjoy it. So if you plan for it ahead of time, you're going to also have the ability to enjoy it a little bit better than if you're there in that moment, crunching numbers, figuring out, having a really hard
Right.
conversation. So,
yeah, I saw this video years ago, and no matter what I type into the search engines, I cannot find the video again. It must have been taken down. But it was a produced video from a large company, and it was a woman saying that her and her husband had just been swiping the credit cards, and they planned her in-laws planned a trip to Disney World, and they lived close enough to be able to drive there in a day or something. And so her and her husband get in the family minivan, and they get the kids down there, and they check into the hotel, and the next day they go to the park, and they go to swipe their credit card, and it's maxed out. And they go to swipe the next credit card, and it's maxed out. And they go to swipe the next credit card, and you can guess what happened. And they had to leave this big family trip at Disney World because they had no money. They had to drive back pretty much with no money to their names, hoping that they got back. And that was the moment when they realized they had to change their habits. And I think sometimes we take military spouses and we're like, oh, there's so much pressure on them, blah, 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 blah. But if you're not communicating with your spouse, I don't care what you do for a living, there's pressure on you guys from a financial standpoint because you're not communicating about it.
Yeah. Having those having that conversation, it's so important. And I don't think that there's like a right way of this is how you should do it, because we're two different people. We all have our different money stories. We look at money differently, but it's important definitely to have those conversations. And I would say to even acknowledge before going at it with like, hey, we have a problem. This is all the things that you're doing wrong. It's like, hey, I think that you're doing great at this. Like, I'm looking at you and you're good at what you're doing with this, with this, with this. How about this? What can we do with this? And that kind of makes the conversation a little bit smoother. Just bringing up the topic in a positive, like in the light of something positive instead of negative.
Definitely. Laura has a great point. Having a travel envelope budgeted is less stressful than checking the bank account before every transaction.
Right.
I will say the one thing that changed about my life great point, Laura. The one thing that changed about my life when I finally started doing a budget is I don't look at my online bank account. I don't. I really don't. I maybe log in like, oh, actually last month or 2 months ago because of the holiday, because you understand how military gets paid, right? 1st and 15th. Right. So I was like, oh, my husband's check should be early this month because of the way that, you know what I mean? So like I just logged in and it told me what date the check was going to be there. Like outside of that, I literally never log into my online banking anymore. I just check the budget. Because I know we're paying these bills in the first half of the month, we're paying these bills in the second half of the month, and I never log into the online banking anymore. Laura with she's coming in hot this morning. I don't care how you do it, just freaking do it.
Yes.
So true. That's the bottom line. Definitely have that conversation, set up that budget, keep logging in on your app, keep checking your spreadsheet until you get to a place where you are comfortable with how you're spending your money.
Right. And even for yourself, like let's say that you are still at a point where you haven't had this difficult conversation with your spouse, but you want to get better at it, then you do it. Then you start it. Whatever system you want to have, a notebook, a software, a spreadsheet, whatever it is, get started. And the more that I like to kind of call it like the more that you expose yourself to it, the more that you expose yourself to your own numbers, the more comfortable you're going to get. The first time you're going to be like, what is this? I have no idea. Like, I don't know what all of these numbers mean. The next time it's going to be like, okay, I don't know what these numbers mean, but it feels a little bit less scary. And then you keep on going and you keep on going. And it really makes a difference.
And that is for personal budgets or for your business account, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Andrea, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This was a great conversation. And anybody who needs bookkeeping help, please check out Andrea's site. All of her links will be in the show notes down below. And I really hope everyone will join us next week for another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. Thanks again, Andrea.
Thank you. Bye.